For the inhabitants, each lot in the square should find a leader for a suitable person for military service, and the size of the lot is 10 stadium squares each street, and the sum of all the lots is 60,000. And from the inhabitants of the mountains and from all the lands there were also many people, who were distributed among the many and had leaders assigned to them according to their districts and villages. The leader had to equip for the war the sixth part of the chariots, thus making a total of 10,000 chariots, also 2 horses and riders for them, and a pair of carriages without seats, accompanied by riders who could fight on foot carrying small shields, and had a careerist standing behind the pioneer to drive 2 horses. Also, he would certainly provide 2 heavily armed soldiers, 2 slingers, 3 stone shooters and 3 spears, a light weapon, and 4 sailors to make a complement of 1,200 ships. That is how the military orders of the city kingdoms of the other 9 orders varied, and it would be tiring to tell some of their differences. For positions and honors, here is the first list. Each of the 10 kings in his own division and within the city had absolute control over the citizens, and, in most cases, were punished, and whoever killed them would do so. Now the order of precedence between them and their mutual relations is governed by the decree of Poseidon, whose law has been ratified. This was written by the first kings on the pillar of orichalcum, located in the center of the island, in the temple of Poseidon, where the kings gathered every 5th and every 6th year in turn, paying the same homage to odd and even numbers. And when they had assembled, they consulted about their common interests, and asked if anyone had violated anything and made a judgment, and before they made a judgment, they promised each other as follows. There were bulls that owned various temples of Poseidon, and 10 kings, who were left alone in the temple, after they had prayed unto the Lord that they might catch the sacrifice which he had received. The oxen were hunted, without arms but with staffs and ropes, and the ox which they caught pointed to the pole and cut its throat from above until the blood fell on the scriptures. Now on the pillars, apart from the law, there is a written oath asking for a curse of obedience. When the reason is that, after slaughtering the cows in the usual way, their limbs are burned, they fill a bowl of wine and throw a clot of blood for each. The other victims were put into the fire, having purified the whole round pole. Then they took from the bowl in a golden cup and poured the offering over the fire. They swore that they would judge according to the law concerning the pillars, and would punish him who at every point had surpassed them, and that for the future they would not, what they could help, offend those who wrote on the pole, and would not order others, or obey any ruler who ordered them, to act other than the law of their father, Poseidon. This is a prayer which is each offered for himself and for his descendants, at the same time drinking and dedicating the cup which he drinks in the sanctuary of God. They were filled, when darkness came, and the fire of sacrifice, they all put on the most beautiful blue robes, and, sitting on the ground, at night, on the embers of the sacrifice which they had appointed, and extinguished all the fires of the temples, they receive and give judgment, if one of them should bring charges against him. And when they were given judgment, at dawn they wrote their sentences on gold tablets, and consecrated them together with their robes as a memorial. There were many special laws affecting some of the kings written about the temples, but the most important were as follows. They did not take up arms against each other, and they all saved if one in each of their cities sought to overthrow the house royal. Like their ancestors, they spoke openly about war and other matters, giving supremacy to the descendants of Atlas. And the king has no power of life and death over any of his kinsmen unless he has the consent of as many as 10. That is the great power with which the gods settled on the lost island of Atlantis, and this he then opposes our land on the following grounds, as tradition says. For generations, as long as the divine nature prevailed in it, they obeyed the law, and were well loved to the gods, who were their descendants, for they have the right spirit and in all things, unite gentleness with wisdom in the various occasions of life, and in their relations with one another. They hated everything except welfare, did not care about the country in which they now lived, and took lightly the possession of gold and other possessions, which seemed to burden them only. Not that they were fancy drunk. Wealth also does not shy away from self-control. But they were drunk, and saw clearly that all these things increased in kindness and friendship to one another, whereas with too many things and respect for them, they lost in their friendship with them. By such contemplation and by their divine continuity in it, the qualities which we have described grow and increase among them. But when the divine part begins to fade, and becomes melted too often and too much with the mortal mixture, and human nature has an advantage, they then, unable to bear their fate, behave accordingly, and every man who has eyes to see grows looks contemptible, for them to lose the most just precious gift, but for those who have no eyes to see true happiness, they look noble and blessed at a time when they are full of greed and unrighteous electricity. Zeus, the god of gods, who ruled according to the law, and could see such things, noticed that the noble nation was in a state of misery, and wished to inflict punishment on them, that they might be whipped and raised, gathering all the gods to abode. The holiest of them, who, placed at the center of the world, sees all that is created. And when he called them together, he spoke as follows: the time of the Critias dialogue is gone. Current Atlantis era records. These include the eruption of Mount Meru in South India and Mount Sumeru Mahameru in East Java. Then a volcanic eruption in Sumatra that formed Lake Toba with the island of Somasir, which is the peak of the mountain that erupted at that time. The most devastating eruption in the future is Mount Krakatau, which divides parts of Sumatra and Java and others and forms the Sunda Strait. Atlantis comes from the Sanskrit Atala, meaning heaven or watchtower, Atalaya Portuguese, Atalaya, Spanish. Plato emphasized that the region of Atlantis at that time was the center of world civilization in the form of culture, natural resources, science, technology, and so on. Plato established that the location of Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean today. In time, he stated that the Earth was flat and surrounded by one ocean as a whole. The ocean comes from the Sanskrit word ashayana, which means to surround the whole. This opinion was later opposed by later experts such as Copernicus, Galileo, Einstein, and Stephen Hawking. Santos differs from Plato regarding the location of Atlantis. Brazilian scientists argue that at the time of the eruption of various volcanoes, the ice sheet melts and flows into the ocean until its territory increases. Water and mud from volcanic ash overload the oceans and their bottoms, causing tremendous pressure on the Earth's crust on the ocean floor, especially on the continental coast. This pressure results in earthquakes. The quake was further amplified by mountains that erupted later in a row and caused a devastating tsunami wave. Santos named it the Heinrich event. In an effort to express an opinion based on world history, it seems that Plato made two mistakes: first about the shape, position of the Earth, which is said to be flat. Second, about the location of the continent of Atlantis, which is said to be in the Atlantic Ocean, which is opposed by Santos. U.S. military research in the Atlantic region proved unsuccessful in finding traces of the missing continent. Therefore, it is not arbitrary that there is a proverb that says, Amicus Plato, am magica veritas is magical. I mean, I like Plato, but I prefer his truth. However, there are some current situations in which Plato and Santos agree. That is, first, that the location of the continent was Atlantis, and by Santos, it was confirmed as the territory of the Republic of Indonesia. Second, the number or length of volcanic chains in Indonesia. Among them are Karen Sea, Talong, Krakatoa, Malabar, Galunggung, Pangrango, Merapi, Merbabu, Semeru, Bromo, Agung, Rinjani. A number of mountains have been or are still active. Third, about the flow of mud due to volcanic eruptions whose ash is mixed with seawater into mud. This mud in the sea then seeps into the land on land. This hot mud is mixed with natural gases, which are an impossible, or navigable, mud barrier that cannot be penetrated or entered. In the case of Sidoarjo, remote sensing has been performed, which indicates that there is a canal system in the area. It is possible that the canal is a former hot mud flow channel from the past. That Indonesia is a region considered the heir of Atlantis, of course, should make us grateful. Makes us not lose in international relations, because Atlantis at that time was the center of world civilization. Archaeological evidence for Atlantis. 1. One day in 1968, the Bimini Islands around the Atlantic Ocean in the Bahamas cluster, the sea was calm and clear as clear glass, penetrating to the seabed. Several divers on their way back to the Bimini Islands suddenly screamed in shock. At the bottom of the sea there is a big road. Several divers jumped down simultaneously. It turned out that there was indeed a large road that stretched from the giant rock. This is a large road built using rectangular and polygonal stones. The size of the stones and their thickness are not the same, but the arrangement is very neat. The contours are brilliant. Is this the way the Atlantis government posts? 2. In the early 70s, a group of researchers had arrived around the islands of Yasuil, Atlantic Ocean. They have taken the coral core by drilling at a depth of 800 meters on the sea floor. Scientifically, this place was actually land 12,000 years ago. Conclusions made on the basis of scientific technology are the same as those described by Plato. However, Is this where the kingdom of Atlantis sank? 3. In 1974, a USSR Marine observer ship made 8 pieces of photographs that, when extracted, formed the work of ancient humans. Was this built by Atlantic people? 4. In 1979, American and French scientists with highly sophisticated instruments discovered a pyramid on the seabed, the Death Triangle, of the Bermuda Sea. The length of the pyramid is about 300 meters, the height is about 200 meters, the top of the pyramid with the ocean surface is only 100 meters, larger than the Egyptian pyramids. At the bottom of the pyramid there are 2 giant holes, seawater with incredible speed flowing at the bottom of the hole. This Great Pyramid, was it built by the inhabitants of Atlantis? Atlan's government forces conquered Egypt. Did the Atlantic bring the pyramidal civilization to Egypt? The American continent also has pyramids. Did it come from Egypt or did it come from the kingdom of Atlantis? 5. In 1985, 2 Norwegian sailors discovered an ancient city beneath the Death Triangle sea area. In the photos taken by the 2 of them, there are squares, vertical and horizontal roads and alleys, domed roofed houses, battle arenas, animals, temples, river banks. They both said, absolute belief, what we find is the Atlantic continent, exactly as Plato described it. Is it true? Unfortunately, the seabed pyramids of the Bermuda Triangle were successfully investigated from sea level using sophisticated instruments. Until now, no scientist has been able to ascertain whether a building was actually built by human force, as it may be the summit of an underwater mountain, pyramid shaped. Photographs of remnants of ancient buildings on the seabed taken by Russian expeditionary forces also cannot prove the existence of a former site of the Kingdom of Atlantis. Afterwards, there was an expeditionary team that dived to the ocean floor along a rocky path at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean on Bimini Island, took rock path samples and conducted laboratory research and analysis. The results show that this stone road is less than 10,000 years old. If this road was made by the Kingdom of Atlantis, it would be at least 10,000 years old. Regarding the photos shown by the 2 Norwegian sailors, nothing can be proven so far. The only correct conclusion that can be drawn is that there is a submerged landmass at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. If it is true that on the top of the Atlantic Ocean there was once a Kingdom of Atlantis, and the Kingdom of Atlantis really sank to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, then traces of the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean can certainly be found. Until recently, the Kingdom of Atlantis remained a mystery throughout the ages. And it is true, from what I saw in the shallow waters of the Caribbean sea floor, there was a very long road with a very modern structure. In addition, waters are also found in some types of buildings that have been destroyed. Is it true that the continent of Atlantis never existed before? Hundreds of thousands of years ago, when the Aryans left their native lands on the coast of Asia, it developed into a new land in Europe until it reached progress in ancient Greek and Roman times. In the past, the first sub-Aryans in prehistoric times inhabited India and the Egyptian colonies, i.e. the second sub-race became Babylonians and Assyrians based on hieroglyphic manuscripts found in ancient Egyptian tombs. The third Aryan sub-race is Iranian Persians, the fourth sub-race is the Celtic civilization that preceded the Greek and Roman civilizations. There is a void from the age of the sub-race, the fifth root sub-race, while the sixth and seventh root developed and spread in the northern continent and southern America. The Atlante race is in the fourth sub-root and has grown into many countries. The great catastrophe that occurred in the Atlantean civilization occurred 4 catastrophes, namely 1. Miocene era 800,000 years ago. 2. Age 200,000 years ago. 3. Era 80,000 years ago. This disaster destroyed the civilization of Atlantis that left the island of Poseidon's Plato's version. 4. Era of 9564 BC, sinking of Poseidon's island. Scientific evidence of the existence of the continent of Atlantis, namely 1. The discovery of a shallow and flat seabed due to land subsidence. 2. The distribution of flora and fauna known from the similarity of its species. 3. In the encounter there are similarities in the type of language and ethnology. 4. There are similarities of beliefs and similarities in ritual practice and similarities in the form of architectural buildings. 5. There are fundamental similarities in ancient records, cultural traditions and cultural legends, especially the story of the Great Flood. Professor Asa Gray, a botanist and zoologist, noted that out of 66 genres and 155 species found in the eastern forests of the Rocky Mountains, only 31 genres and 78 species were found, which are genres and species native to this area. This proves that there are several animals and plants native to other districts. This is also evidence that this area was once united in one large land area and was not bounded by the ocean. A German botanist, Professor Kuntz, argues that the non-Native American banana plant, banana, comes from the tropical climate around the equator, namely Asia and Africa. This proves that previous civilizations brought this tree to America. Evidence of the previous Indonesian archipelago is that there was once an advanced civilization that Europeans called Atlantis, and another version is the Ramayana and the Mahabharata that occurred after the era of Atlantis as follows. About bananas. University of Melbourne, Australia. Research concluded and proved that bananas only originate from one region, in addition to the genus Enset, which produces what is called fake bananas. They grow in 130 countries while the native varieties come from Southeast Asia. This means that the original banana is the result of genetic engineering made by humans, and it comes from only one region, whereas the exact location called landmark Asia. Banana, Pacoba, or Pakova, comes from the term Tupi Pakawa, which means Papua, a herbaceous plant of the Musaceae family of the genus Musa. This is only sourced in Indonesia, in Papua. Archaeological and paleo-environmental evidence recently uncovered in Cook Swamp in the Western Highlands province of New Guinea suggests that this plant has existed since at least 5000 BC and even up to 8000 BC. Bananas are mentioned in written documents, for the first time in history, in old texts around 600 BC. Musaceae, especially the genus Moses, was introduced to the world by immigrants from Southeast Asia. About 200 BC, Alexander the Great recorded eating bananas in 327 BC. The above information proves that banana only originated from the previous Indonesian archipelago, is the result of technological engineering for the consumption of creatures that have more capabilities than ordinary humans. Hanuman. What are the advantages of this plant that was made as a result of genetic engineering by humans, who must have been in the previous advanced civilization? Note carefully. Bananas contain natural radioactive material in the form of potassium-40, a radioactive isotope, especially potassium-40, 40K. The main natural source of radioactivity in plant tissues is potassium. 0.0117% of naturally occurring potassium is the unstable isotope potassium-40, 40K. This isotope decays with a half-time of about 1.25 billion years, 4 times 10^16 seconds, and therefore the natural radioactivity of potassium is about 31 becquerels per gram, meaning that, in 1 gram of the element, about 31 atoms will react every second. Because a typical banana contains about half a gram of potassium, it will have an activity of about 15 becquerels. Bananas contain 15 grams of carbon, it will emit about 3 to 5 beta rays per second. Using this factor, a single dose equivalent to a banana comes out about 5.02 nanosieverts per becquerel times 31 becquerels per gram times 0.5 grams approximately equals 78 nanosieverts equals 0.078 microsieverts, meaning that bananas naturally emit 0.078 microsieverts of radiation, and at large doses this is at 3500 millisieverts is dangerous condition. The International Commission on Radiological Protection estimates a coefficient of 6.2 nanosieverts per becquerel for potassium-40 consumption, with this datum of bed calculated to be 0.096 microsieverts, closer to the standard value of 0.1. The value of 9.82 times 10⁻8 sieverts, or about 0.1 microsieverts, 10 μrem, for bananas weighing 150 grams, 5.3 ounces. Here's a comparison of radiation doses on sieverts, ranging from trivial to deadly. Banana 150 grams, 5.3 ounces, equals 0.078 microsieverts. Maximum allowable radiation for a 2,500 bed, 250 microsieverts nuclear power plant. Chest CT scan yielded 70,000 bed, 7 millisieverts. The lethal radiation dose is approximately 35 million bed, 3,500 millisieverts. It's concise. A banana truck is able to sound the alarm radiation portal monitor nuclear detection. This is the advantage of bananas, as the food of creatures, results of genetic engineering, that are super capable in the past. It means that both Hanuman and his food are the result of human thinking. If you believe the story of the bird, a Babel, carrying a hot stone attacking the elephant team, Without his beak burning, it is not a myth. Then our logic work has become good without the influence of dogma, unilateral subjective interpretation, about Hanuman. If we believe as confidently as the bird, a Babel, carries hot stones against the army of elephants, should we be obliged to label the story of Hanuman as mythos?